Hi, I'm a rock historian, producer, and best-selling author. My name is Denny Somack, and this is The Rock Podcast. We're the number one podcast for all things classic rock. On this episode, you'll hear my conversation with Michael Shrieve, a founding member of Santana and one of the greatest drummers in rock. Stayed with them through 5 albums and best known for his amazing live performance on Soul Sacrifice at Woodstock, which was a highlight of the movie. We've all seen him. He had just turned 20 years old when he played Woodstock, making him the youngest musician to perform at the festival. That drum solo during Soul Sacrifice has been described as electrifying, and as I said, it was one of the highlights. He has a great new album out, Drums of Compassion, and it's sort of a sonic landscape with guests like Jack DeJohnette, Trey Gunn, Olatunji, all sorts of people. We talk about that record, which is very different than what you might expect. He also discusses some of the other groups he's been a part of, like Automatic Man, Novo Combo, Go with Steve Winwood, and the short-lived Hagar, Schon, Aaronson, Shrieve band with Sammy Hagar and Neil Schon. So he's been around. Here's my conversation with superstar drummer Michael Shrieve. Anyway, thanks for joining me today. I appreciate it.
Sure.
So obviously we'll start with Drums of Compassion. I listened to it. I think it's amazing. It really blew me away. It really blew me away. So
thank you.
Start off by the people that haven't heard it yet, because it's fairly new. Could you talk a little bit about it and why it took so long to get it done?
Well, the premise of the record, it started one night when I came home at 2 a.m. after I used to go and listen to music all the time. Different kinds of music in clubs and things like that in Seattle when I moved here in 1990. And I thought, what kind of music could I make that I would want to listen to at 2 a.m. as a drummer? Because I'm trying to chill out. I'm trying to come down from a night out and stuff like that. So that's the premise of the record. And so in that aspect, it's like, it's a chill record in a lot of ways. And then I also always had this thing about music and healing and frequency and vibration and that sort of thing. I've always been into that. And the Dalai Lama had just come out with a statement saying, what we need now is compassion. And I took that from Michael Olatunji's 1968 album called Drums of Passion. And I combined those two to make Drums of Compassion. Interestingly enough, Olatunji does the first opening incantation of the album. Mm-hmm. He's no longer living, but I had that recording from another project that I was doing in the 80s called Abraxas Pool with the original Santana guys, except for Carlos. So that's the premise of the record. So the record is, it's not for everybody, but I wanted the drums to play in a way that was not beat oriented. And I wanted to show another way that drums could be, like skipping a rock down a river or something like that, So that's the whole thing behind it. The reason it took so long is, I don't know. I do know, but it's a long story.
Did you record it in parts over the years, or you just, whenever you had time, it was like...
So the way it started, I started the whole thing with Jeff Grinke, the synthesist on the record. And it was just he and I, the two of us. And I was playing like 14 drums standing up in a semicircle. That was the setup. So there was no backbeat vibe or anything like that. And he's a very ambient synthesist. So That's how we first recorded it, and that was what it was intended to be. And then I lived with it for a while, and it just didn't feel like it was enough. It felt kind of new agey, which I don't have anything against. In fact, this album is up for it, possible Grammy in the new age category. So
Nothing like anything on Windham Hill, that's for sure.
yeah, right. So yeah, I mean, then later I started adding people to it, and
Yeah, you
at
got a
first,
number of people on here. You want to mention a few of them?
yeah, absolutely. Zakir Hussein, Ayrto Moriera, Jack DeJohnette, Trey Gunn, whose label it is on. Trey Gunn used to be with King Crimson, and he's an exceptional musician in his own right. And he has a record label called 7D Media that felt like it might be a good home for it, and he expressed an interest for it. Because it does kind of fall through the cracks, like whatever this record is. But to me, it's a beautiful statement of where I am at in my life, like personally and musically. I've got a lot of other stuff that's ready to be put out as well, but this feels like a real honest statement from me at 75 years old.
So when you say you got a lot of other stuff, is this stuff that's like in your archives, or is this newly recorded stuff over the last couple of years, or what?
Yeah, I've got new stuff that I want to put out as well. I've got some really interesting stuff. It's not quite like this. This is unique, but I want to let this thing be out there for a while before I put new stuff. And on the other hand, I don't want to wait 20 years between records. I've done a lot of stuff, in that period of time. Just this one dragged on for a while. But it seems like when I finally finished at the very end, and I was adding things up until the last minute, or taking things out, it's it seems right. Whatever it is, it just seems right, like a fine wine or something like that.
Mhm. Okay. Well, you asked all these people personally. I assume not at the same time, since a couple of them are no longer with us. But is there anybody you wanted to get that you couldn't?
Well, that's an interesting question because I really pitched Evelyn Glennie on it, and Evelyn Glennie is a classical female percussionist from Scotland who's regarded as one of the greats. And I certainly pursued her for a while. I flew down to San Francisco. I took her out to dinner. I went to her show. When she came up here, and we almost had it. But at the last minute, she canceled because she was doing a performance with the Seattle Symphony, and she didn't want to be distracted because it was a world premiere of a piece that she commissioned. And I mean, I even approached Sinead O'Connor. I wanted to get some women on it,
Right.
So it went through a lot of me trying to figure out what was what. And Ayrto and Zakir happened to be in Seattle for Bumbershoot Festival, and the studio was right across the road from where the festival was. So they came in together, along with an African drummer that didn't make the record, and then Jack DeJohnette, that was separate. He was in town, and I asked him, and then it went from there. It's kind of like really piece by piece, but I think it doesn't sound like that necessarily. I think it sounds pretty cohesive. I really worked on that so that it felt like everybody's in the room.
So are you pleased with the initial reaction?
Yes, I am. People have been some of the reviews have been really beautiful. Really, I mean, really meaningful to me in the way that some people that I really respect and their opinions of music over the years have said some very kind things about it, and also the fact that they have mentioned the fact that, you know, a lot of my peers my age, they don't continue to grow in a certain way, you know, or they stay in a certain place. And I'm pretty curious, and I like to try a whole bunch of different things. And so that has been acknowledged as well, which I appreciate.
Okay, well, obviously, this is a multi-generational show. For those that are not too familiar or only a little familiar, I'd like to just touch on some of your history, if that's okay.
Sure.
You came to prominence with Santana. Were you the last original member to join that band?
Yes, I was. Yeah.
You were 19, 20, something like
I
that?
was 19. Yeah, the band was all together. Except for Chapito, the timbale player. He came after me. But the band was a popular band, Santana, in the Bay Area. They would play. I mean, I saw them at a church dance when I was like young, and I really liked them. I really wanted to play with them. I've seen them several times, and they were quite popular. They played the Fillmore and places like that, and but they didn't have a record out. So when I got in the band, literally, I walked into a recording studio when the original drummer was passing in the door. We passed each other in the doorway, and they were recording their first album. And a couple of the people remembered me from me sitting in at the Fillmore with Michael Bloomfield and Al Cooper and Stephen Stills. And they asked me to play just a jam that night when I just happened to go to the studio. And that night they asked me to join the band.
So on the first, what do you remember about the first Santana album?
Well, I mean, they were already in the middle of it, and they were, you know, this is the material they've been playing for several years. So I had to fit myself in there.
Remember any specific tracks?
Well, Jingo, I remember, you know, well, a bunch of them, man. I mean, it was, what we did was we went and they stopped recording. We went and rehearsed, and then came back to the studio and played. And so what I remember is trying to fit myself into the band. You know, how do I play? I'm not a Latin drummer. I'm not really a rock drummer. I aspired to be a jazz drummer. And so, you know, it was quite an experience fitting myself in there and seeing what would work, what not to play as much as what to play.
Okay. Then, of course, on the next album, really explodes with Evil Ways. Is that on the second?
Yeah, Abraxas. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think about that, and I'm really, to this day, proud of us for, you know, the second album is always the hardest for bands that have been together for a long time. You know, and because they've been playing the music from the first album years before they got signed. So to come up with the other music was a whole nother thing. Bill Graham really took an interest in the band, and he was the one that brought like Oya Como Va to the band. And I brought Black Magic Woman to the band. Everybody in that group like had their own kind of personal music scene, you know. My thing was jazz, but I heard this song on a Fleetwood Mac record, and I told Greg Raleigh, I think you would sound really good singing this. And so, you know, that was an important album for us, that second record.
Were you a Peter Green fan?
Oh, very much, yeah.
Mhm. Had
There,
had anybody else in the band, Carlos or anybody else, were they aware of the early Fleetwood Mac?
yeah, Carlos was a fan of Peter Green. Um, Definitely, I don't know what it was about that, but there was that stuff was so cool that Fleetwood Mac was doing back then, and Peter and I later became friends, and he used to stay at my house in Mill Valley when I was on the road, and but yeah, that album, I mean, we really pulled it together in a real professional way, with kind of short songs and but we also edited. I mean, I remember I edited some of those singles. I just went in and did it. I don't know. I didn't ask permission. I just went and did it and hope everybody liked them. So it was a great band. And during that time when we were playing, like recording Abraxas, there was a certain studio in San Francisco called Wally Hyder's. And at the same time we were recording that, in the next room, Creedence Clearwater was recording their record that became huge. Downstairs, I just discovered by some photos recently that Jim Marshall had taken myself. I recorded with David Crosby on his first solo album. And there's a photo there of me and David and Jerry Garcia and Neil Young and Phil Lesh playing. So that's all happening in this one recording studio at the same time.
Okay. So Oyukamava came about.
Oye, como va? Yeah. Um, that was a Tito Puente song, and Bill Graham was big into salsa and Latin music, so he recommended it. Yeah,
So you liked it the first time you heard it?
yeah, it was a lot of fun. I mean, it was interesting learning how to play this stuff and make a record. It's so making a record is different to just playing. Playing in a club or playing. Although Santana played everything live in the studio for the most part, except for the guitar players. They always like punch in and get it perfect. But yeah, Oye Como Va. It felt great, right?
So tell me a little bit, give me like a view from the top of what's going on the stage when you start doing that song.
Well, to set the stage, I think it's true that nobody knew us. The Bay Area, they knew us, but nobody knew us. We didn't have a record out. So, but Bill Graham had told us that we're going to be in this festival. It's going to change everything, and he put us on the road and play some big festivals that summer, like July, so that we could get used to being in front of bigger crowds. There were the big pop festivals going on during that summer of '69, and and so that everybody was playing every and so that got us geared up for it. But one of the things that I realized when we play together, we play closely together. We play actually to and for each other in the band. It's not so much like looking out in the audience sort of thing where you're performing, your hits or something. And so, in retrospect, that was our comfort zone. When you're in front of half a million people, and as far as you can see are people, just like being at the ocean, and it's just water and then the sky. That could be very frightening, very intimidating. Plus, we're really high up on a stage, and then the people are quite a distance away. Photographers are in between the people and the stage, and so we played to each other, and that was, I think, the way that made us comfortable. And that was just another night. I mean, we played like that every night, you know. So, but it was caught on film, and I knew that when we finished that song, the crowd reaction was just amazing. And I have a theory about it where the crowd was kind of tribal, you know. It was very much a us and them period, you know. It's like the straight people and the freaks and the hippies and the band was real tribal. And we brought like a tribal rhythm and a big, huge wave of rhythm, and the people connected with it. And so that was really something, you know.
I'm trying to remember, was that in the middle of the set or towards the end of the set?
Towards the end of the set, because I think it might have been the closing tune. Maybe we did an encore, but I remember just from the picture where I know I got up after the last hit, and it seemed like, okay, we're done, you know. And Bill Graham coming over and saying something to Greg. So it was a great show. Everything was wonderful, but we didn't know what the film was going to be, and we didn't even think about it. So when the film came out, I was certainly surprised to see myself cut up in 5 or 6 pictures there, and the band being, featured like it was. That was a real revelation, and that
How,
changed.
how soon after the movie came out did you get a chance to see it, and where did you see it?
I think it was. I think it was like a year almost. And I remember being in New York City. Although some guys say we flew down to L.A., I don't remember that. But because I remember standing outside in line with everybody else, all the people, and then a crowd came out from the earlier showing, and the first time people started pointing at us. Like they had just seen us, and there we were in line waiting to get in. And that was a first. And so then, it's hard to describe.
Changed everything, didn't it?
Changed everything. I mean, it changed everything. And Martin Scorsese edited those clips of me and her and Thelma Schumacher, his editor. But yeah, it changed everything. I mean, to this day, it's just, no matter what I do, how many albums I've done or how many other projects, it's all about Woodstock, So, and it took me a long time to get used to the fact that, like, just shut up and stop trying to tell everybody about what you did recently. Just be gracious and be grateful that there's still like something you did 50 years ago,
Well, I would say that not just that performance, but that performance is what's made you one of the 10 best drummers in the world. I mean, all the
Yeah,
polls say that, so I'll take it.
yeah. Although there's another video on YouTube that's much better than my solo at Woodstock, and that was at Tanglewood a year later. And that set was just unbelievable. Woodstock is Woodstock. I mean, if I listen to the solo, I don't really care for it. But if I see the film, I understand it completely, like why people like it. I mean, I get it's just like electric, It's just, and it's joyful, just, and it's intense. It's intense. I mean, so it was kind of a phenomenal thing, just that capturing that on film, I believe, and that's why it still stays with people. But I always say, "Oh, I did a better solo the next year," and you can see it on YouTube.
So, what do you remember about the when you were inducted into the Hall of Fame?
I remember that Fleetwood Mac was inducted the same day, same night. the Eagles as well. And I remember Peter Green being there, and I don't think Fleetwood Mac wanted him to play with them. And so Carlos graciously asked him to play with us on Black Magic Woman, which is only right. And then I remember giving my speech, which was just off the cuff, and it was really good. I decided, here's my time where I'm going to tell my story that everybody has asked me, like, how the hell did you get in a band like that when you were a young white kid, you know? I told the whole story about going to the Fillmore and Michael Bloomfield and you know, I said, so I moved in with these guys, and here I am with a militant black, a Nicaraguan, a Mexican, and two white boys from the suburbs. And I soon learned quickly that this was no hippie love thing. This band was like a street gang, and the weapon was music. And it was a good speech for off the cuff. It was a good story, is what it was. As long as I told the story, and it was a good night, man. It was a good night.
Really appreciate you taking the time out. I was really looking forward to talking with you and going a little bit in depth. Some of the questions I'm sure you get asked all the time, but I think we got a little deeper than that, and I just appreciate it very much.
You're very welcome.
Good luck with the record, and thank you very much again for doing it.
Thank you, man. Take care.
Have a good day, Michael. That's it for this edition of The Rock Podcast. I want to remind you that we have a video version on YouTube, and it's all free, no charge. As always, thanks for joining us and helping us to become the #1 podcast in classic rock. Find us at our website. Correspond with us there. rocknroll4grownups.com. That's rock, the letter N, roll, the number 4, grownups.com. Listen to previous episodes with John Anderson, Steve Howe, Jeff Beck, Kate Bush, Black Sabbath, Jimmy Page, and others. I'm Denny Somack. That's it for this episode. Thanks.